Well, you just do what you're trained to do.
Mm.
It's like you get all this training and then you're put to the test and then you do what you're trained to do. And so a yogi should think like this. A yogi should think that what am I training my mind for today? If this were my last moment, where would my thoughts naturally go? You know, um, a lot of times I think people ask, they ask themselves, like, how will I die? But the real question we should be asking yourself is, you know, what am I training? How am I training myself for that moment in my daily thoughts, in my daily actions? Um, I know that that day may come, and it may be, years from now, or maybe tomorrow. Um, I can't count that I'm just going to rise to that occasion without training for it.
Yeah.
More likely I'll default to my training. And if that training includes devotion and clear discernment and having a heart that's always kind of connected to God, then that last moment can be the finest moment, perfect moment, beautiful moment.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from New York City's Upper West Side, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily spiritual podcast. I'm your host today, Kaustubha Das, with special guest host Kishori Gopi today. Hello, Kishori Gopi.
Hi, Bull. Hi, Krishna. Thanks for having me back.
Always good to have you back. And Raghunath is on the road, but he's here to
Yay!
just kind of poke his head in here and say hello to us. Raghunath, what's going on? Where are you? What's happening?
We're going to give you a fast little drop in. It's springtime here in Berlin. We are on the way to Berlin. We had a killer show in Essen yesterday. It was so inspiring to see so many devotees, truthfully, from the punk hardcore scene that are still there, still around. Decades later, we did our 30th year anniversary of the Mantra record, and everyone's buying Jagannath shirts. And it was like a family reunion. It was beautiful. And Gothenburg was equally as the Gothenburg show was incredible. Uh, Devotees and friends from Norway showed up to Sweden. And so today we're on the way to Berlin. Satchidananda Swami usually comes to the show, but he's out of town right now. He didn't get back from his travels.
Oh.
And so there's a very cool grassroots a devotee tattoo shop in Berlin.
Oh, yeah.
And they're all coming, making prasad. We're going to Three Boons Yoga, which used to be Jiva Mukti. And we're doing a yoga class, kirtan, prasad distribution. Then we're doing kirtan at the show. And then we're playing at SO36, which is the equivalent to like the East Village of Manhattan. And that's always a killer show. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Just touring a few dates here in Germany. We're going to get in the show tomorrow. Today was not good just because we're in a car. We're going to suck up all our data. But tomorrow we're going to push the show back an hour. We think we can make it.
Awesome.
Not an
Right
hour.
there?
It's like pushing it back an hour from, pushing it back
No,
like
right? What time?
quite a
What
few
time are
We
we
hours.
were talking about doing it at
Oh, an
9
hour
a.m.
from what
Eastern
we're
time. We're going to
scheduled.
do it at 10 a.m.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're doing it 10 a.m. Eastern time. So for you guys, it's way back. Hopefully, great for Californians. Hopefully, some of you guys can join us. I don't like to miss the show, and it just doesn't work great when we're in the van, just because we have limited data plan on the phone. But we're inspired. We're inspired, and we are just about the whole van was ready to chant a chapter of the. We just read Nectar Devotion, and we are about to chant a chapter of the Bhagavad Gita.
All right, beautiful.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
Raghunath, I've noticed you've been investing in a lot of sportswear lately. Here,
Thank you.
you're looking like a
It's
football hooligan or something like that. Every day you got like
no,
a new.
it's like one of the straight edge kids we took from Sweden that we took on tour back in the days. We're friends with like a gang of people from Sweden, and the guy who set up the show just said, "Hey, by the way, do you guys want any clothing?" I work for Fila.
Okay.
I work for Fila, and he just brought a box of
nice.
clothing for us to take. So I'm wearing a lovely velour Fila sweat jacket.
Velour.
Love that.
Paramananda came from Florida, so he was not prepared because Sweden was as cold as upstate New York. So Paramananda shows up in a pair of shorts and slip-ons. So it was lucky. We saved our butts by giving us like
There you go.
various sportswear. Paramananda, you want to share anything?
Raghunath was mad because I got there first and picked through all the good stuff. But he get the velour sweat
Velour.
jacket, sweat top that looks quite fancy
Very
on him.
rich. Very.
Thank you very much. Krishna
Regal.
Chaitanya's here. Say Harry Ball.
Haribol, everyone.
Ah,
Hare
yes.
Krishna.
Very cool.
That's Chandrabhaga's husband, Mukunda Kishore from San Diego.
Hare
Hey.
Krishna.
Hello.
From the Ben and Esther's famous vegan deli and Pappy's Barber Shop. And then, of course, we got Road Rage from Croatia. I'm not going to let him talk because he's driving.
Mm.
And Miss Mara is by my side. These are all the regulars from Wisdom of the Sages. And then we got some other crew we just took along with us there. Mr. Sammy from, a.k.a. Sammy, famous from Youth Today, Project X, Judge, etc. And Alex from Citizen of the World,
Sammy's taking a nap
Supreme
back there. Just.
tour manager.
Oh yeah. Okay. Good.
That's our
good.
crew. So anyway,
All
have
right.
a great show. We love you.
Thank you. We'll see you
Raghu,
tomorrow.
I saw you
at
on
10.
stage with Mara or somebody was Instagram living you in. So I feel like I've sort of gone to one of your concerts now, but it was wild. You were jumping and
That's wild.
screaming and kicking around
Yeah.
stage.
You know, Narayani was there yesterday. Parikshit was there yesterday. Andy from Essen was there from yesterday.
Amazing.
It was very cool, actually. So many devotees
Very nice.
came, and plus devotees I've known there for years. So anyway, it was very special.
Thank you,
And just
Raghunath.
sweet people, you know,
Thank
who
you.
say things like, you know, and you can see how there's different levels of people practicing spirituality. Some people came up to me and said, you know, the lyrics of the songs, which are all based on the Bhagavatam, you know, it changed the whole direction of my life. I became clean. I became sober. I became a vegetarian or a vegan. One guy said that to me yesterday, 30 years ago. I became a vegan because of this album. So it's sort of like, it's nice to see people where they're at. And as devotees and as people trying to spread the holy name, we got to give people whatever they can digest to upgrade their life. And I think that's what we're all about into. We're into upgrading our lives and to assisting people to upgrade their lives and taking care of ourselves but extending our hand at the same time. I love you all.
Thank you, Raghu.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Legendary work.
Thanks, Kishori. We love you.
Thank you for allowing me to serve. I love you.
I love you all.
I love you.
Tell
Mara's
Sammy I
doing
love
good
him.
too, by the way.
I love you, Mara.
Love you.
She's holding it down with a tour schedule.
Okay.
That
good.
feminine
Okay,
energy
very
in
well.
that Sprinter van.
Okay.
All right, very
Okay, we can remute us.
Okay.
Okay, you are muted. All right, so that was one important announcement, that we have this unusual timer here at 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow, but we are here, and you can come back for that, Kishore. You free for that?
Tomorrow at
Yeah.
10 a.m.
Yeah.
Perhaps I might
Okay,
have a
put you on
client
the
at 10
spot.
a.m.
Okay, we'll be back one way
I
or
can check
another.
my calendar. I will be there if I can.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And then another announcement is that the signups are wide open now. As a matter of fact, they're 70% full for the Sage groups.
Yeah.
So it's about nearly 250 slots have already been filled up, and there's about another 100 or so open. So if you would like to join a Sage group, now is the time to do that. Go to the Sage community platform at wisdomofthesages.com. And then follow the info for Sage groups, and you can sign up for a Sage group today. Don't wait too long. Okay.
We also have a little reminder from
Oh.
Yvette in the chat that the BRG Philly meeting is in person tonight at 7
Okay.
p.m. at the Bhakti Garden, and it's also online. And you can go to the Wisdom of the Sages or BRG website.
Look at you, just taking over the announcements. You're like a natural.
Trying to help. I've watched you all do it for many years. So
Yeah, right.
I'm trying to remember.
Okay. Yeah. All right, Kishori Gopi, we have a nugget for today.
We
Would you like to
do.
read it?
Yeah, I'd love
Where's
to.
this from? Where does it come from?
This really resonates with me. We don't actually have a name of a person in which it comes from, but it's a
Yeah.
saying that's popular among athletes, soldiers, and emergency responders.
Okay.
And it goes like this: you won't rise to the occasion, you'll default to your training.
You won't rise to the occasion. Maybe like that's some kind of romantic idea that we have based on movies or something like that. That's some like when the test comes, somehow we just rise. It's no, 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 no. You default to your training. As prepared as you are for that moment, you'll be able to rise to it. Otherwise, you'll have trouble rising to it, huh?
Exactly. And I was saying to you, I resonate with that I was a competitive alpine ski racer for most of my life, age 5 through college. And
Wow.
we trained, I mean, from summer training and traveling to go to glaciers to ski on, right, to morning sport and dryland training, to then finally getting on the hill, right, and training so many runs, going through those gates so many times, and then the race is like a minute
Right.
long, right? And even at the start, we would inspect the course, and then I'd be at the top of the course. And I'd imagine myself going through the course. I'd have the course memorized and see myself going through the gates and then get in the start. And then it's like, okay, this is what I've been training for.
Mm-hmm.
And then go. And so, you practice falling, you practice correcting if you get late, just like this. And so then as a yogi now, right, as someone who meditates and has a sadhana practice for all of us on the show, I feel like our japa, our meditation practice is our training ground for like life,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, it's absolutely, and one part of it, like there'll be so many other parts of our training, but the reason why I brought this nugget up today was
Mm.
because we're going to read a short segment from the Bhagavatam
Hmm.
that speaks about this King Katvanga. I think this is he's mentioned, I believe, in Mahabharata and maybe in other Puranas.
Okay.
I don't know how much though, but he's famous from Bhagavatam just for this one little short segment. And we'll read about it today, but it really has to do with, are we prepared for that final test, when death comes to
Yeah.
us?
Mm.
And we see that Katvanga was like particularly well prepared. Um, and I probably all of us to some degree or another have had that experience. I know that I had this experience in dreams, especially, where like you have some big important exam and you realize the moment comes and you're like entirely unprepared. You know?
You didn't study.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure I've had it in life for real, but like I know I've had it in dreams where it's like this really, really profound feeling of my God, I'm totally unprepared. And here's the moment, and there's nothing I can do about
Yeah,
it.
that's like my worst nightmare.
Okay, well, here's the thing: is that we're all going to, at some point in our life, come to the end of it.
Hmm.
And, it may be something that, often we're just saying, well, that's a long way down the road, and I don't need to think about that very much. That
Yeah.
may or may not be. But even if that's the case, when that moment comes, as yogis, we understand that our awareness, our consciousness that we develop to that point becomes so important in what our future is.
Hmm.
And so yogis, they see like the entire life in one sense as a preparation for that moment. When that moment comes, when everything's stripped away, when our job title is stripped away and our relationships are stripped away and our achievements are stripped away, what will come to the surface? Will it be like, can we just hope that something magical is going to happen at that moment? Um, and we'll just be lifted to rise to the occasion, or will we default to our training? Will we go back? Does clarity just appear to us in that final moment, or is it revealed that we had this clarity all along, even in the face of that test?
Mm.
And
Could it be
that's,
both?
well, certainly there's aspects of mercy and special
Yeah.
things can happen, but what we're being taught is that we should prepare ourselves for that moment, that we shouldn't be lost there feeling like, oh no, I didn't prepare. I wasn't ready for this. We should train our mind and train our heart to be turning towards divinity at every step in our life. So when that moment comes, we do what we've always done. We remember, our mind naturally goes to where we brought our mind again and again and again. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a famous verse, yam yam vapi smaran bhavam jajanyante kalevaram tam tam evati kaunteya saratad bhava bhavata, that when that moment comes, when the soul leaves the body, whatever it is that we're remembering, that's where we go. That's the nature that we take. And so then Krishna says, Tasmat sarveshu. So he says, prepare yourself at every moment. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu. Therefore, tasmat sarveshu kaleshu, at all times, right? Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara. Remember me. Yeah, be thinking of me all the time. Mam anusmara yudicha, and at the same time fight. So like he's saying, Arjuna, even on a battlefield, your mind can be towards me. You can do it for me. You can do it in consciousness of me. And tasmat sarveshu kaleshu. Therefore, at all times, we should be training for that moment. We should be asking ourselves, can my last moment be my finest moment? And if it is, well, then I need to be preparing for that moment. And I can be preparing for it all the time. I remember, similar to what you said, I remember my wife said that when she was, like in school, she was on a basketball team.
Yeah.
And she had a coach, and the coach said, okay. And none of the athletes, the team members had ever had a coach like this, but the coach said, this is what we're going to do. When the game starts, this person's going to throw it to that person. This person's going to throw it to that person. This person will go there, and then we're going to score. That's how we're going to, and
I had a plan.
Yeah, and they practice it, and then when they did it, and when it came time for the game, they just did it. They defaulted to their training, and it worked. I also remember, my father flew planes in the war, and he never really talked to me about that. I never really heard him talk much about that. But once I saw someone that was really like fascinated by that, and they were asking him, how do you do that? Like, how do you get an airplane and people are shooting at you and you're flying? I think with humility, my father said, well, you just do what you're trained to do. It's like you get all this training, and then you're put to the test, and then you do what you're trained to do. And so a yogi should think like this. A yogi should think that, what am I training my mind for today? If this were my last moment, where would my thoughts naturally go? A lot of times I think people ask, they ask themselves, like, how will I die? But the real question we should be asking yourself is, what am I training? How am I training myself for that moment in my daily thoughts, in my daily actions? I know that day may come, and it may be, years from now or maybe tomorrow. I can't count that I'm just going to rise to that occasion without training for it. More likely I'll default to my training. And if that training includes devotion and clear discernment and having a heart that's always kind of connected to God, then that last moment can be can be the finest moment, perfect moment, beautiful moment. And we've seen people pass away like that, and it's very inspiring. But we see that they get there by a lifetime of dedication, a lifetime of training. I wake up every morning, I do my meditation. I wake up every morning, I read my Bhagavad Gita. I go out there, I try to serve. I reflect on this. I try to represent this and live this at every moment. And if that happens, that becomes my default.
Right. We're like training to surrender on a daily basis in smaller ways for that ultimate surrender.
So what happened to your skiing career anyway?
What happened? Well, the material world, it all crumbled. Well, no, Raghu's mentioned
Did you
before.
want to ski like in the Olympics or something like that?
That was part of my goal. That was
Yeah.
one of my goals for a while. And I went to a ski academy in high school and from 8th grade to 12th grade. And Several of my friends were in the Olympics, snowboarding,
Really?
skiing, alpine skiing, and Nordic skiing.
Do
Yeah.
do a lot of the skiers come from Vermont? Like a lot of the
Yeah, we
professional
have
skiers?
really we do have really good skiers because there's great training programs here, excuse me, for that. Yeah. So I decided I was on the development team, the US development team for a short period of time, the US ski team.
Development means that the people are developing for the Olympics?
Yeah, I get,
Wow.
yes. And then I wanted to go to college. I was like this, it's just many people take a postgraduate year where you take a gap year and you train more and hopefully you make the team and
I
like
see.
that. But I went to college and then I broke my femur, my first college race, first D1 carnival.
Oh,
And that was my first injury. So I skied the rest of my time in college, the next 3 years, but I was a little bit more timid because I had never been hurt up until that
oh,
point.
got a little bit scared there.
Yeah. So truthfully, I wasn't quite as fast after that.
I
But
see, yeah.
yeah, and now I ski for fun and I
Right.
climb up the mountain called skinning and but it trained me, Kaustubha, to have really to know discipline. And I also come from a military family. My dad and my grandfather, my dad and my brother are all fighter pilots. So,
Okay.
or my grandfather was, my dad was, my brother is. But I learned time management, I learned discipline, give me a prescription, tell me what to do, and I'll do it. So it sort
Right.
of segued me, prepared me for my yoga practice. Um, and as you were talking, I remember we read one year at school, we read Lance Armstrong's autobiography.
Okay.
And one thing that really struck me that he said was pre, no, pre, it's about planning. So, hold on, let me just get it. Preparing, unpreparing is preparing to fail, something like this,
Oh,
or
being unprepared is preparing to fail.
yeah, but it rhymed, and now I'm
Oh,
not
okay.
forgetting it. But it was like that, and
You should
it's
have prepared for this.
you should have prepared.
Like,
You should have. I should have prepared for this. I didn't know you were going to say. Yeah, but it's about that preparation because,
right.
like, we never know what's going to happen in our life. I have no idea what's going to happen today. So why not have that like sort of spiritual armor, and be prepared as
Yeah.
best I can for the unknown.
Yeah, and with bhakti, it's not like oh, then I'm
I
the,
remember it. It's
oh,
failing to prepare is preparing to fail.
oh, perfect. There we go. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. That's
Yeah.
right. So and with bhakti, it's not like it's just drudgery, all the preparation or anything like that. No, it's a beautiful life to live, but it's just
Yeah.
a life always moving in one direction, always,
Single pointed.
yeah, it's single pointed, always moving in that direction. And if you're always moving in that direction in your life, then when that test comes, then that'll be your default. You'll still be moving in that direction.
So this is why we're trying to always remember Krishna, never forget him.
Yeah, because that test, it'll be potentially a far scarier test than any other exam that we've ever had.
Oh yeah.
So, so let's not fail to prepare, and let's hear about Katvanga. And he's such an interesting example. It's like I don't know anything about Katvanga except what we're going to read. But people refer to it often because he's such a great example of it. So shall we dive in?
Yeah, let's do the mantras first.
Yeah, I'll do the Sanskrit, you'll do the English?
Beautiful.
Okay. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayat.
Before reciting the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author.
Nashta prayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki.
By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact.
Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha.
I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him.
Okay, so we're reading today from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 9. And we're going to, as we've been doing in the ninth canto quite a bit, we're going to fly over some area where, again, we're hearing a list. The last story that we just heard ended with Bhagirata, who brought down the Ganga for the benefit of his forefathers. And then it begins to go down a list again of this person had this son, and this son married this daughter, and they had this, and it goes down it's coming down like a family tree. And the next chapter is when it opens up and goes into lots of detail again, because it comes to the life of Lord Ram. So that's like a big important one. But before we get there, there's this kind of like it opens up just a little bit. It starts to give us some detail about the life of one person, and that is the famous Maharaj Katvanga. Would you like to read text 41?
Yes, please. From Balika came a son named Dasharatha. From Dasharatha came a son named Adavidi. Advidi, how do you say that?
Idavidi.
Idavidi. And from Idavidi came King Vishvasha. The son of King Vishvasha was the famous Maharaj Katvanga.
Katvanga Maharaj. So, okay, now it's going to open up here, and they say the famous Maharaj. So it's like, okay, we're going to hear a little bit more about him. So we're coming down this royal genealogy, and it's giving us, in a sense, it's giving us just a little bit of background about Katvanga, that we know right off the bat. He's not a mystic living in a cave. He's part of a lineage of kings who have a lot of worldly responsibility. So we know at least what we know about him is that he's a man of the world, right? He didn't renounce the world, but he lived his life right in it, dealing with stuff, and we'll hear a little bit more about that now.
Like all of us.
Yeah, but probably a lot more responsibility.
Yes, as a king. Okay, text 42. King Katvanga was unconquerable in any fight. Requested by the demigods to join them in fighting the demons, he won victory. And the demigods, being very pleased, wanted to give him a benediction. The king inquired from them about the duration of his life and was informed that he had only 1 moment more. Wow. Thus, he immediately left his palace and went to his own residence, where he engaged his mind fully on the lotus feet of the Lord.
All right. So, yeah.
1 moment. Sorry, that struck me that he had, King Parikshit had 7 days. He's being told he has 1 moment.
Yeah. I mean, how long that moment was, because it sounds like he did a little something, but whatever it was a very short amount of time. And this is the central part of this drama that we're going to hear right now, right? That one, we see that he was powerful at what he did, right? He was the king, and these kings weren't just sitting on thrones. They had to go out and protect people and fight in battle.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly saying he's fighting from the demons. So like he would be called upon to fight with the devas, on behalf of the devas. It means he was, incredibly powerful. Good. And by doing so, it says that the devas were very pleased, and they wanted to give him a benediction. Now, this is an important question, right? One, what would we do if we had the devas granting us a benediction?
What a question.
What do you want?
What would you do?
Well, I would hope I would do something, similar to what, it's again, you default to your training, right?
Yep.
So like, certainly it would be very tempting, like we don't know until we're, in other words, like say we were standing in the world of the devas. You could look around, and suddenly the world will look a lot more beautiful than it's ever looked before, and a lot more promising for quote unquote happiness. Like a man would look at the women and just be like, oh my God, I've never I've never seen anyone like that before. And And it might be very difficult. Like I like to think that my training is such
Mm.
that I might respond in something like King Katvanga did, like, okay, here's an important piece of information that you could provide me that I'm not aware of, right? He's saying my whole life is engaged in preparing for that final moment. If I knew exactly when that final moment would be, maybe that'll help me be well prepared for it. So rather than say, well, I would like, Indra, I see you've got a nice setup here. I would like a setup in a similar way, like, I see, you have beautiful wives and you have, great luxury. I want something like that. He doesn't ask anything for that. Like he's talking to people that can really provide super high level material abundance and prosperity and experience and pleasures. And instead he asks this very sobering question, I would like to know when I'm going to die. Right? Let's see, how does it say? The king inquired from him about the duration of his life.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gets this shocking answer. You have basically a moment more to live. And so then it says, thus he immediately left his palace and he went to his own, maybe that means Indra's palace, I'm not sure.
Oh, must be.
And he went to his own residence where he engaged his mind fully on the lotus feet of the Lord. Let's see if there's a commentary. There is.
Yeah.
The example of Maharaj Katvanga in performing devotional service is brilliant. Maharaj Katvanga engaged himself for only a moment in devotional service to the Lord, but he was promoted back to Godhead. Therefore, if one practices devotional service from the beginning of his life, surely he will return home back to Godhead without a doubt. The Bhagavad Gita uses the word asamshaya. Was that used in this verse?
I don't think.
No. Okay, but Prabhupada's just drawing us.
Yeah.
Asamshaya is used to describe the devotee. There the Lord himself gives this instruction. This is the seventh. This is the first verse of the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And that's like a border, like a division in the Gita, right? Because the first 6 chapters deal especially with karma yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And the second 6 chapters deal especially with bhakti yoga. So there's a shift. And the 6th chapter ended with Arjuna expressing his fear that now that Krishna had described Ashtanga yoga in great detail, which is how Arjuna was thinking that is what a yogi is.
Mm-hmm.
Going off into a secluded place and controlling the mind with incredible self-discipline. Arjuna hears this and says, the mind is more difficult to control than the wind. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. And what's going to happen to me now? And Krishna says, no, you can still be a yogi. And then he describes, he ends the 6th chapter and the first section of the Bhagavad Gita, the first 6 chapters, with the verse, what is it again? Yoginam api sarvesham. Amongst all the yogis, yoginam api sarvesham, madgaten antar atmana, one who's always thinking of me within themselves. Madgaten antar atmana shradhavan bhajate yo mam, and who with great faith worships me. Same yuktatamo mataha, that they are the most yukta, they are the most connected, they are the highest yogi of all. That is my opinion. Yeah. So, one who's always thinking of Krishna within themselves, that's the highest yogi. Now, the natural question Arjuna would ask is, how can I do that? How can I be that kind of yogi?
Mm-hmm.
And then Krishna opens up the 7th chapter, the next verse, with this, Maya Shakta Mana Partha, Yogam Yunjan Madashaya. How to be connected in yoga. Asamshayam Samagram Mam, Yata Gyasyashi Touch Trinu. Now hear, touch Trinu, just hear from me, Arjuna. Now hear, O Arjuna, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, right? Not part of your consciousness, not part of your awareness, but that your awareness fully goes to him. How by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. And so that's the art of bhakti yoga. That's what we try to do. That's what we practice. And by practicing, it can become the default, in the moment of truth, which we see happens here with Katvanga. Okay, so text 43.
Text 43. Maharaj Katvanga thought, not even my life is dearer to me than the Brahminical culture and the Brahmanas, who are worshipped by my family. What then is to be said of my kingdom, land, wife, children, and opulence? Nothing is dearer to me than the Brahmanas.
Okay, so here, here he's not talking about just some caste,
Yeah.
but what he's talking about is deeply spiritual people who, even though his life had this worldly external kind of element to it, all along he was being instructed by deeply spiritual people that lived very simple lives, people that had a lot of wisdom, people that had with that simplicity, they had a certain detachment, a certain clarity, spiritual clarity, so that although being a king, he was probably living in opulence. Being a king, he was had to be deeply engaged in worldly affairs. But there was this part of him that said, what became dear to him was the Brahminical culture. What became super important to him, what was really the essence in kind of what his internal life was, even though he was having to live that external life, was all that he was hearing, all the instructions and the example that he was getting from these brahmanas. Now, text 44 is really interesting because it's going to give us an example of how he lived his whole life.
Okay. Kaustubha, if we had more of our leadership receiving counsel in this way, we'd be in a different place, wouldn't we?
Yeah, that's the point that I always like to share when we talk about like
The caste system.
the caste system is, we hear about it and it sounds like it's and not that it hasn't been sometimes, but it sounds like a model for exploitation. That's how people see it. That's how it's
Right.
presented today. Really, its intention was the exact opposite. Really, the intention was, we need to train our leaders in higher ethics so that they won't exploit others, so that they'll have such a strong ethical background of care. So our spiritual leaders need this, the brahmanas. Our political leaders need this, the kshatriyas. And our business leaders need this, the vaishyas. And if they all get like a thorough training and understanding that it brings benefit to themselves, and they will find deeper happiness themselves by seeing their role as that of caring for others, then they will be happier and everyone will be happier.
Right.
and we don't have that at all.
We don't have that.
So if you don't like the caste system, then tell me, what is your plan for educating our leaders?
Right.
And if you have one, then my guess will be it's something like the same thing, because the problem is that it became like based on birth, but it was never based on birth. Bhagavad Gita says that it's based on, what is it, guna karma vibhagasha, that it's based on chaturvarnyam mayashristam guna karma vibhagasha, that it's based on one's guna, one's qualities, and one's karma, one's activities, one's behavior. And so if you have a plan where people, according to their qualities and their behavior, take on different leadership roles, and they receive thorough training in that leadership to care for others, then basically that's exactly what we're talking about. That's all we're asking for here, in one sense.
Right. Yeah. And then it's like the body. I love the analogy how it's like the body, and they each function,
Sure.
have their own function, and it's holistic, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Let's aspire for that.
Okay.
Text 44. I was never attracted, even in my childhood, by insignificant things or irreligious principles. I did not find anything more substantial than the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Okay. So
Wow.
this is so significant the way that he phrases it too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was never attracted, even in my childhood, by insignificant things. That's a nice way to put it, or irreligious, adharmic principles. I did not find anything more substantial, more meaningful, right? More real than connecting to God. I wonder how it's phrased here in Sanskrit. Than Uttama Shloka. Than that person, that divine person who's glorified by beautiful verses, by choice verses, Uttama Shloka. So he's saying, like I've lived a life where I've kept the main thing the main thing. I never was attracted to adharma. I never degraded myself by getting caught up in things that really turned me away from divinity.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, he wasn't caught up in insignificant things, even if it's not like straight out super adharmic. There's just so much distraction out there. There's so much that we can get lost in. There's so much that is insignificant that we're wasting our time on.
True.
And in doing so, we're kind of like losing the opportunity to set that default that we want, that focus default that will come to us in that final moment. So he's got this whole life, an entire background of a life where he had a lot of focus. He wouldn't allow himself to become sidetracked.
Imagine, I mean, being born with that, as you were just saying, guna and dharma, right? It's
Guna
like,
and karma. Yeah.
and karma, guna and karma, where the majority of us are focusing on insignificant things
Yes.
and irreligious principles for most of our life, unless we're born into perhaps a devotional family. It's just really fascinating to think about this, and I like to
Yeah,
think about who was he in his previous life, or what?
yeah.
Yeah,
Even certainly there are people that live noble lives that haven't been like raised in this tradition.
yeah,
But we do live in a society that's, you know, it's quote unquote free, which means that it's not being guided except by our desire. And
mhm.
so the default kind of becomes, what can I do to make money to find enjoyment? And we find that therefore, like, we don't like the idea, for instance, of like regulating
Our
our,
senses.
well, no, I was saying, like regulating, for instance, take a platform like television or radio.
Mhm.
We want that to be free. And granted, it's important in many senses that it is, but we don't like, certainly there's some regulation, like you can't just take pornography and put it on like,
Netflix.
yeah, or I don't know, it probably gets pretty close. I'm not
Mm,
sure.
maybe.
But yeah, there's a certain amount of regulation that we
Hmm.
have, but it's still pretty wide open. So like all kinds of stuff that's really practically, even objectively garbage,
Mm,
stuff that we can practically all agree on. This doesn't really have any value in making us better people. This
hmm.
is something that we do to waste time and have a laugh.
Yeah.
We promote that kind of stuff and we advertise that kind of stuff, and we allow our society allows that stuff to be um, broadcast and promoted in such a way where we become victims to it, where
Mm.
we get caught up in it. You walk through Times Square and it's just like blasting, like all these images at you, like you need this, you want that, take this, go for that, buy this.
Naked cowboys. I
Yeah.
was shocked when I went to Times Square last Rath Yatra. I was like, what is happening here?
So in one sense, it's not regulated. If I want to produce a television show that has no real value for anybody's character, as a matter of fact, it's kind of like, just like, sugary food is going to gradually deteriorate my health. This watching the stuff is just going to deteriorate my character. Nobody's really even, hardly anybody will even question that. still we allow that stuff to be promoted,
Mhm.
then we do become victims. We do become distracted by so much. And so Katvanga he's an example of, no, you know what? From the very beginning, nothing was distracting me. From my entire life, I didn't get absorbed in insignificant things. You know, I had, we can imagine he was living in a culture that was directing him and providing him all kinds of substantial information, substantial education, substantial entertainment. Everything, you know, had meaning to it. Everything was edifying to a nobility and you know, development of character and development, spiritual qualities. And that becomes his default. So we may not be like him. We may not have had that early inclination towards truth. We've grown up in a very different world. But it's not too
Developed.
late.
Yeah,
You know?
be developed. It's just
Yeah.
interesting how it's considered sort of abnormal to then like, oh, something's off with this kid or something's off with you that you're not wanting to be into that pop culture and the TV. So,
Yeah, people might view you that way.
right. Well, that's why we have Sangha.
Yeah. I mean, even when I was a kid, it wasn't like I was rebelling against that
You
kind
were,
of world, although I didn't really have the answer.
you were Mr. Counterculture.
Yeah, I was into counterculture. I mean, you know, like, you know, if you looked at me at school and, you know, especially back then, you know, if I had spiked hair and crazy clothes and all
You
of
had
that.
spiked hair?
Yeah.
Did you
You
ever
have no
dye it?
idea. Huh?
Did you ever dye it? Was
No, I
it
never dyed my hair.
okay?
Um, but uh, but you know, they looked at me and said, "We got to get this kid out of the class with the other kids." He's like, you know, they kind of
Something's a
removed
little
me.
off with Kaustubha.
Huh?
They were like, something's a little off with.
Yeah, oh, they definitely thought something was off. Yeah. So
Wow. And look at you now, leading us all home.
I don't know. But any case, but the point is, it was people couldn't understand it,
Yeah.
and so here we have Katvanga, you know, born and raised into a culture that's going to support this. Now
Mm.
he's lived a whole life where he's never distracted, and we're coming up to his test now.
Okay, text 45.
Yeah.
The demigods, the directors of the three worlds, wanted to give me whatever benediction I desired. I did not want their benedictions, however, because I am interested in the supreme personality of Godhead, who created everything in this material world.
Mm.
I am more interested in the supreme personality of Godhead than in all material benedictions.
So there you go. You see, even the Devas themselves, they have interest in these things.
Mm.
And Katvanga is like, there's nothing that you have that I'm really very interested in. You know, there's no material thing, even though I get it. You know, this place is very beautiful and very opulent. My mind's been trained in this way that I've lost interest in these things, or I've never developed an interest in these things. So therefore, he asked for this very strange. I wonder how the Devas thought, what they thought
Yeah.
when they said, "Okay, what would you like? You know, would you like, you know, a palace? Would you like a planet? Would you like some kind of position? You know, would you like, you know, women, wealth? What is it that you want? I would like to know when I'm going to die." You know, it's like they probably looked at him and thought, "Wow, you know, like he's on another level." You know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yes.
So he wasn't interested in a reward for what he had just risked his life fighting on behalf, you know, fighting
For that.
ferocious, yeah, asuras.
Mm.
He wasn't doing it for any material reward. And so when he was offered something by someone that had something that he didn't have, which was like knowledge of the span of his life,
Mm-hmm.
he just asked for that. It shows his priority is, I'm focused on this relationship that I have with God. I'm not focused on any material reward. The material rewards will just they'll just distract me from what's important.
And it also doesn't describe him like lamenting or freaking out or being
Yeah,
anxiety that he's gonna die. He's just like, okay, I'm going home and I'm gonna call out to God.
yeah, totally right. Like if
Mhm.
most of us were told that, oh, you know, we have
a
very
moment.
short amount of, you have a moment left, you have a day left. It would be very hard not to immediately feel a deep sense of tragedy, fear,
Grief.
lamentation, grief, why me, resentment. He didn't have any of that.
Yeah, it's like, I just fought and I won and I didn't die in battle and now I'm gonna die. He's like, okay, go execute on the plan.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, impressive. Okay.
Okay.
Text 46.
Yeah.
Even though the demigods have the advantages of being situated in the higher planetary system, their minds, senses, and intelligence are agitated by material conditions. Therefore, even such elevated persons fail to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is eternally situated in the core of the heart.
Yeah.
What then is to be said of others, such as human beings, who have fewer advantages?
Okay, so
Yeah.
he knows he knows what's substantial. Even these great powerful souls, they get lost and they don't come in touch with God who's right in their own heart. That's where my focus is.
Gives us hope for that, for us humans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Text 47. Therefore, I should now give up my attachment for things created by the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I should engage in thought of the Lord and should thus surrender unto him. This material creation, having been created by the external energy of the Lord, is like an imaginary town visualized on a hill or in a forest. Every conditioned soul has a natural attraction and attachment for material things, but one must simply give up this attachment and surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
It kind of like a classic Vedantic view, right? That we look at this world and it seems very real, but actually it's fleeting. It seems like it's up there on a hill and it's beautiful and it's what we should be climbing for, what we should be trying to attain. But really, it's just going to disappear in a moment. And so Katvanga sees it that way. He sees the world as temporary. Not so much like he's trying to escape it, but he wants to keep his focus on what's eternal. On what's real in that sense. And so he's unbewildered.
He's unbewildered. To be unbewildered. Okay, text 48. Thus, Maharaj Katvanga, by his advanced intelligence in rendering service to the Lord, gave up false identification with the body, full of ignorance. In his original position of eternal servitorship, he engaged himself in rendering service to the Lord.
Yeah, we don't even know exactly what that looked like because he had such a short amount of time. But we know that, as you were saying, there was no lamentation here. There's no fear here. He was, as we were saying earlier, he was, what do they call it? Going to the default, right? He was just kind of,
he was training.
Defaulting to his training. Yeah.
Yeah, and just there was complete, immediate acceptance and surrender.
Yeah.
Okay. Text 49. Is this the last one?
This is it.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, Krishna, is extremely difficult to understand for unintelligent men who accept him as impersonal or void, which he is not. The Lord is therefore understood and sung about by pure devotees.
There was this power that he had to stay focused. It wasn't merely it wasn't dependent merely upon his self-discipline or his self kind of developed detachment, but it had to do with love. It had to do with, a loving attraction that he had for Krishna as a person. And because he approached with no envy or fear, that attachment grew in him naturally, and it was strong, and therefore in this moment he was completely fixed. Whereas if we can't understand the Supreme as this person, then we're dependent on our own strength, like that.
Right.
If we're not reaching out for that personal connection. So he had that. He was trained in it. He lived it. Even in his youth, he wasn't distracted from it. Even when he attained great opulence and power and influence, he still couldn't be distracted from it. It was a training that was deep within him, something that became like the operating system within him, you know, always operating underneath. So that when that moment came and he was about to die, he wasn't hoping something unfamiliar would pop up and he would somehow magically develop some kind of spiritual clarity. No, it was the clarity that he had all along became revealed, even under such a externally stressful situation. And
he was prepared.
He was prepared. What had been there all along just manifested, and he was entirely, you could say, rising to the occasion, but he more or less he defaulted to his training, which was already very elevated.
So we need to be mindful what we're training for, because we could be training for the wrong thing.
Yeah, you want to be careful.
Like a ski race.
You're right. Somehow you got saved with that injury. Maybe.
Yeah.
You know, Radha Swami, he was he was he was wrestling in high school.
Yeah.
And then he got injured. And when he got injured, you know, it was kind of like a scary injury. It was like his arm got dislocated. And but in that moment, he felt like, I'm free now. Like I don't have to do this wrestling anymore, which kind of like he felt a little bit like he was getting
pressure and bound to.
Yeah.
I didn't, I'll say, but I remember my dad said to me, one day you will realize that if this didn't happen, you'll never would have gotten to where you are now. And I see that now. And that's when I first started contemplating, who am I beyond a ski racer?
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Dad.
Krishna working in our lives in different ways we don't even know about.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Kishori Gopi.
Thank you for having me. Such
an
honor
to
to serve.
Tomorrow we'll figure that out. Otherwise, tomorrow we're back at 10 a.m. Eastern time, unusual time. But happy to see you all then. And for everybody else that's listening on other platforms, it's a beautiful day for a beautiful day. Let the magic continue to flow. See you all tomorrow. Haribol.
Haribol.